Chapter 1, The Discovery. The mining station Erebus hung in the void like a mechanical spider, its industrial arms reaching toward the swirling anomaly that had appeared 3 months ago. Commander Jake Reaper Morrison stood at the observation deck, his weathered face reflected in the reinforced transparisteel as he watched the routine extraction operations. The nickname had followed him from his military days, earned not from any particular bloodthirstiness, but from his uncanny ability to survive when others didn't. These days, it felt more like a curse than a compliment. Still brooding over that wormhole, Jake? Dr. Lydia Cross approached, her tablet displaying readings that defied conventional astrophysics. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her green eyes sparkled with the kind of intellectual curiosity that made her both invaluable and occasionally dangerous to be around. The gravitational readings are off the charts again. This thing shouldn't be stable, yet here we are, 3 months later, and it's more consistent than atomic clockwork. Morrison turned from the window, his gray eyes carrying the weight of too many failed missions. Consistent doesn't mean safe, document. In my experience, when something in space behaves too perfectly, it's usually because someone, or something, is making it behave that way. Captain Rex Valdez's voice crackled over the comm system, interrupting their conversation. Hey, you two might want to see this. We've got something big coming through the anomaly. And I mean really big. Valdez had been running mining operations in this sector for 15 years, hauling precious metals and rare elements to fuel humanity's expanding presence in the galaxy. If something made him nervous, it was worth paying attention to. The three of them rushed to the primary sensor array, where the tactical display showed an object emerging from the wormhole's swirling depths. It was massive, easily 50 kilometers across, and its architecture was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Ancient, geometric patterns covered its surface, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to bend space around it. The structure was clearly artificial, but it predated any known civilization by what appeared to be millions of years. My God, Dr. Cross whispered, her scientific instruments struggling to make sense of the readings. The energy signatures, this thing is older than the Zephyrian Confederation, older than the Thackeray Dominion. It might even predate the formation of this galaxy's spiral arms. As they watched in stunned silence, the massive structure, which Cross had dubbed the Hades Gate, began transmitting. Not just simple radio signals, but complex quantum broadcasts that would reach every advanced species in the galaxy within hours. The message was mathematical, universal, and terrifying in its implications: coordinates, energy readings, and what appeared to be an invitation, or a summons. The space around the gate began to distort, reality itself seeming to ripple like water. Morrison felt his stomach drop as gravitational anomalies played havoc with the station's artificial gravity. Through the observation port, he could see tears in spacetime itself, dark rents through which alien stars flickered ominously. Then, as if responding to some cosmic signal, the gate's inner ring began to rotate, building up energies that made their sensors scream warnings. From its depths emerged ships, if they could be called ships, that moved with predatory grace. The vessels seemed to phase in and out of normal space, their hulls reflecting starlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Whatever was coming through the Hades Gate, Morrison realized with the cold certainty of a veteran soldier, it wasn't coming in peace. Chapter 2, The Nephilim Empire. Within hours of the first emergence, intelligence reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The beings coming through the Hades Gate called themselves the Nephilim Empire, though empire seemed an inadequate term for what they represented. They were ancient beyond measure, originating from another galaxy entirely, or perhaps another dimension altogether. Their technology was so advanced it appeared to violate the fundamental laws of physics, their ships phasing through solid matter as if it were mere suggestion, their weapons erasing targets from existence rather than simply destroying them. The Nephilim operated as a hive-mind collective, but unlike crude biological networks, theirs was a sophisticated consciousness spanning multiple castes. Warriors that existed partially outside normal spacetime, scientists who manipulated reality at the quantum level, and an ancient overmind that had been orchestrating galactic harvests for eons. Their goal was chillingly simple: the great consumption, a systematic harvesting of all sentient life to fuel their interdimensional expansion. The galactic political landscape that had existed for millennia was about to be shattered. 7 major powers had maintained an uneasy peace through careful balance and mutual deterrence. The Zephyrian Confederation, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form millennia ago, possessed the most advanced technology. Their crystalline ships could manipulate matter at the atomic level and travel through dimensions most species couldn't even perceive. The Thrakkeray Dominion represented the galaxy's military might, a warrior culture that had conquered a dozen star systems through superior tactics and weapons technology. Their battle cruisers could crack planets, and their soldiers were genetically enhanced for combat effectiveness. For 3,000 years, they had been considered the galaxy's ultimate military force. The Vegan Collective brought mental prowess to the galactic community. These telepathic beings could coordinate fleets through pure thought, anticipate enemy movements through precognitive abilities, and had served as the galaxy's strategic planners and diplomats. Their mental networks spanning multiple star systems made them invaluable as both allies and mediators. Among these ancient powers, humanity was the newcomer, barely 3 centuries into space travel, lacking the advanced technology of the Zephyrians, the military tradition of the Thrakkeray, or the mental abilities of the Vegans. They were generally considered the weakest link in galactic civilization, tolerated more than respected, their contributions limited to raw materials and industrial production. But the Hades Gate changed everything. The massive structure continued to pulse with energies that defied analysis, creating a stable portal between galaxies that conventional physics said should have collapsed in microseconds. Dr. Cross's preliminary studies revealed that it required specific energy resonances to operate, resonances that seemed to be building towards something catastrophic. More troubling, their attempts to damage or destroy the gate with conventional weapons had no effect whatsoever. It existed partially outside normal spacetime, making it effectively invulnerable to traditional attacks. As Morrison studied the reports flowing in from across the galaxy, he found himself thinking about the patterns. His military background had taught him to look for the logic in enemy movements, to find the strategy behind apparent chaos. The Nephilim weren't just invading, they were positioning themselves for something much larger. The gate wasn't just a portal, it was a beachhead, a staging ground for an operation that would dwarf anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Cross had become obsessed with the impossible physics surrounding the gate, spending sleepless nights trying to understand how beings could manipulate reality itself. Her academic background had prepared her for theoretical impossibilities, but witnessing them firsthand was transforming her from a pure scientist into something harder, more focused on practical applications. Captain Valdez, meanwhile, represented the pragmatic human response to cosmic horror: adapt, survive, and find a way to keep moving forward. His experience in the dangerous business of deep space mining had taught him that the universe was full of things that could kill you, and the key to survival was never assuming you understood all the threats. As he watched the first Nephilim scouts emerge from the gate, he was already calculating supply routes and evacuation procedures, the instinctive response of someone who had learned that preparation was the only reliable defense against the unknown. Chapter 3, First Contact. Where the first Nephilim scout fleets emerged from the Hades Gate like shadows given form, their vessels moving through space with an unnatural fluidity that made seasoned spacers feel sick just watching. They struck without warning, without demands, without any attempt at communication. The Zephyrian research station of Alpha Centauri 7 simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased so completely that spacetime itself seemed to forget it had ever been there. Within days, the reports became a catalogue of impossible defeats. The Zephyrian Confederation's most advanced energy shields, capable of deflecting stellar radiation, simply passed Nephilim weapons through as if they weren't there. Their dimensional phase technology, perfected over millennia, proved useless against beings who existed partially outside normal reality. Entire Zephyrian colonies vanished overnight, their crystalline cities reduced to empty plots of space where nothing remained, not even debris. The Thrakkeray Dominion's response was typically direct and catastrophically inadequate. Their greatest battle fleet, led by War Commander Thaktar himself, engaged a single Nephilim vessel near the Regulus system. The Thrakkeray brought their most devastating weapons, plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, quantum torpedoes that disrupted matter at the subatomic level, and boarding parties equipped with power armor that had conquered worlds. The battle lasted exactly 14 minutes. The Nephilim ship never fired a single weapon. Instead, it simply phased through the Thrakkeray vessels, and as it passed, the mighty warships began to unravel from the inside out. Molecular bonds dissolved, metal flowed like liquid, and the proud warriors found their weapons turning to dust in their hands. War Commander Thaktar's final transmission was a warning to all who would listen: they are not fighting us. They are erasing us. The vegan collective's fate was perhaps the most disturbing. Their telepathic abilities, which had made them the galaxy's premier strategists, became a liability when confronted with the Nephilim hive mind. Vegan telepaths who attempted to scan Nephilim forces were instantly overwhelmed by an alien consciousness so vast and alien that it drove them insane. The collective mental network that had been their greatest strength became a vector for madness, spreading psychic contamination across their colonies faster than any plague. It was on the fourth day of the invasion that humanity got its first real look at the enemy. Morrison had insisted on taking a reconnaissance mission personally, leading a small fleet of modified mining vessels to observe Nephilim operations at a safe distance. What they saw changed everything. They're not military, Morrison realized, watching the alien vessels through the sensor displays. Look at their movement patterns, their formation structure. They're harvesting operations, not conquest fleets. His military training allowed him to see what others had missed. The Nephilim weren't trying to defeat galactic forces, they were simply clearing obstacles from their harvesting grounds. Dr. Cross, studying the energy readings from her position aboard Morrison's flagship, made an even more crucial discovery. Jake, look at this. The Nephilim ships, they're not generating their own power. They're drawing energy directly from the Hades gate through some kind of quantum entanglement. Cut them off from the gate, and they might be vulnerable. More importantly, human industrial equipment, crude by galactic standards, was proving surprisingly effective against Nephilim technology. Mining lasers designed to cut through asteroids could actually damage their ships' hulls. Explosive charges meant for clearing rock formations disrupted their phase-shifting abilities. It was as if the Nephilim had evolved to counter advanced, elegant technologies but were unprepared for humanity's brute force approach. The realization led to humanity's first victory against the invaders. Captain Valdez had rigged his mining vessel with every piece of industrial equipment he could mount: plasma cutters, gravity hammers, even magnetic grapples designed for asteroid capture. When a Nephilim scout encountered his ship in the Titan's Shadow Nebula, Valdez didn't try to fight elegantly. He simply rammed the alien vessel and activated every tool simultaneously. The Nephilim ship, caught off guard by such primitive tactics, suffered catastrophic damage before it could phase out of normal space. For the first time since the invasion began, an alien vessel was destroyed rather than simply withdrawing. More importantly, Valdez's crew managed to recover fragments of Nephilim technology, providing Dr. Cross with her first physical samples to study. News of the victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and suddenly the surviving galactic powers found themselves looking to humanity not for industrial support, but for military leadership. Morrison found himself appointed as the first interspecies tactical coordinator, his unorthodox approaches suddenly invaluable against an enemy that conventional wisdom couldn't touch. The desperate alliance that formed in the following weeks was unlike anything in galactic history. Zephyrian energy manipulation technology was combined with human engineering practicality. Thrakkeray warriors, their pride shattered but their courage intact, volunteered to test human-designed weapons systems. Vegan telepaths, carefully shielded from the Nephilim hive mind, provided strategic coordination for multi-species. For the first time since the invasion began, the galaxy had hope. But Morrison knew that their small victories were just the beginning. The real battle would be at the source, the Hades Gate itself. And that fight would require everything they had learned, and more than they thought possible. Chapter 4, The Gate Strategy. The war room aboard the hastily constructed command station Unity buzzed with controlled chaos as representatives from 6 surviving galactic powers gathered around Morrison's tactical display. The holographic projection showed the Hades Gate in excruciating detail, its massive structure pulsing with energies that Dr. Cross's instruments could barely measure. After weeks of desperate defensive actions, Morrison had convinced the Galactic leaders that their only chance lay in a direct assault on the gate itself. The Nephilim hive mind is their greatest strength, but it's also their weakness, Morrison explained, his weathered face illuminated by the tactical displays. They think as one, which means they can't adapt to truly independent tactical thinking. Human, pack-hunter, strategies, small groups operating independently but coordinating toward a common goal, confuse their collective consciousness. They keep trying to predict our next move as if we were a single entity. Zephyrian fleet leader Karthek, his crystalline form shimmering with barely contained energy, projected skepticism through the translation matrix. Your species' chaotic approach has yielded minor victories, Commander Morrison, but the gate is defended by forces that exist partially outside normal spacetime. How do you propose to fight beings that can manipulate reality itself? Dr. Cross stepped forward, her presentation materials showing the results of weeks spent analyzing captured Nephilim technology. That's exactly why we can do this. I've developed what I'm calling Reality Anchor technology, a fusion of human quantum field generators with Zephyrian energy manipulation systems. It creates localized zones where spacetime becomes rigid, preventing reality manipulation within a defined area. The strategy Morrison proposed was audacious to the point of insanity. While massive diversionary fleets engaged Nephilim forces across multiple star systems, a small multi-species commando team would infiltrate the Hades Gate's control systems. The gate's power source was located at its core, protected by layers of defenses that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Reaching it would require passing through zones where physics became mere suggestions and reality bent to the will of ancient alien intelligences. Thrakkeray Warmaster Kethvar, his scarred features bearing testimony to decades of combat, studied the infiltration routes with professional interest. Your plan requires us to trust technologies we barely understand, operated by beings whose thought processes we cannot predict. In my culture, such plans are called glorious suicide missions. Maybe, Morrison acknowledged. But the alternative is watching every sentient species in the galaxy get harvested for whatever the hell the great consumption actually involves. We've seen what happens when we fight them conventionally. This is our one chance to take the initiative. The multi-species cooperation required for the mission pushed the boundaries of what anyone thought possible. Zephyrian energy beings worked alongside human engineers to create hybrid weapons systems that combined elegant energy manipulation with brute force industrial applications. Thrakkeray warriors volunteered to serve as physical protection for technical specialists, despite the fact that traditional armor and weapons were largely useless against Nephilim technology. Vegan telepaths developed psychic shielding techniques that could protect against the collective consciousness's overwhelming mental pressure, though the strain of maintaining such shields was enormous. Captain Valdez found himself coordinating logistics for an operation unlike anything in galactic history. Supply lines had to account for the dietary needs of energy beings, the equipment requirements of multiple species, and the reality warping effects that occurred near the Hades Gate. His mining fleet, retrofitted with the most advanced hybrid technologies the Alliance could produce, would serve as both transport and mobile base of operations. The approach to the gate required threading through asteroid fields and nebula formations while avoiding Nephilim patrol routes that existed in multiple dimensions. Dr. Cross's reality anchors provided protection from spacetime distortions, but they also advertised the team's presence to any Nephilim forces capable of detecting dimensional manipulation. It was a technological game of cat and mouse played across multiple layers of reality. As they drew closer to the gate, the very nature of space around them began to change. Stars appeared in configurations that defied stellar formation theory. Gravity flowed in spirals rather than simple attractional fields. Light bent in directions that had no names in any known language. Morrison found himself relying not just on his military training, but on an almost instinctive understanding of how to operate in environments where normal rules no longer applied. The Nephilim response was immediate and terrifying. The ancient overmind, which had remained dormant throughout the initial invasion, awakened to personally direct the gate's defense. Suddenly, the team found themselves facing not just advanced technology, but beings that existed across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. Guardian constructs materialized that were part machine, part energy, and part something that human minds could barely process. Reality around the gate became fluid as the Nephilim deployed weapons that treated physics as optional guidelines. Temporal manipulation attempts sought to prevent the attack by erasing it from history before it could begin. Space itself became a weapon as dimensional rifts opened to swallow attacking vessels. Morrison watched his carefully planned approach routes dissolve into chaos as the battlefield became a constantly shifting maze of altered physics. But the diverse nature of the attacking force proved to be their salvation. While Nephilim defenses adapted to counter specific technologies or tactical approaches, they couldn't simultaneously account for Zephyrian energy manipulation, Thrakari warrior instincts, vegan telepathic coordination, and human practical innovation. The hive mind consciousness, accustomed to facing single-species threats, found itself overwhelmed by the sheer variety of approaches being used against it. As the team finally breached the gate's outer defenses and approached the core control chamber, Morrison realized that they had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history, not just cooperation between species, but true tactical integration. Each species' strengths compensated for others' weaknesses, creating a combined capability that exceeded the sum of its parts. Now they just had to survive long enough to use it. Chapter 5, Battle for Reality. The core control chamber of the Hades Gate existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, its crystalline architecture shifting through geometric configurations that hurt to perceive directly. Morrison led his multi-species team through corridors where up and down were matters of opinion, where their footsteps echoed from directions that didn't exist in normal spacetime. Dr. Cross's reality anchors strained against forces that sought to rewrite the fundamental constants of physics, their energy readings fluctuating wildly as the devices fought to maintain zones of stable reality. The Nephilim defenders they encountered were unlike anything seen during the initial invasion. These were Guardian constructs specifically designed to protect the gate's core systems, beings of living geometry that could reshape themselves according to the tactical requirements of each moment. Some appeared as warrior forms bristling with weapons that fired condensed mathematics. Others existed as pure energy patterns that moved through solid matter like ghosts, striking from unexpected angles before phasing back into dimensions their enemies couldn't perceive. Morrison's tactical training had prepared him for urban warfare, ship-to-ship combat, even zero-gravity operations, but fighting in a space where physics were negotiable required entirely new approaches. "Forget everything you know about cover and concealment," he commanded over the comm system as reality warped around them. "Think of this as underwater combat, 3-dimensional movement, attacks from any direction, and your environment is actively hostile." Thrakari Warmaster Kethvar adapted to the chaos with the practical efficiency of a lifetime warrior. His traditional weapons were useless here, but his combat instincts translated perfectly to multidimensional warfare. He moved through the shifting architecture like a predator, using human-designed reality anchors to create stable fighting positions before launching attacks with hybrid weapon systems that combined Thrakari military doctrine with human industrial brutality. Dr. Cross fought a parallel battle against the gate's control systems themselves. Her analysis equipment, heavily modified with Zephyrian energy manipulation components, probed the ancient alien technology looking for shutdown procedures. What she found was more disturbing than she had imagined. The gate wasn't just a portal between galaxies, it was a massive reality manipulation device designed to weaken the barriers between dimensions throughout this entire region of space. "Jake," she called over the tactical network, her voice strained as she interfaced directly with technology that was old when the galaxy was young. "The gate isn't just letting them in, it's preparing our entire local galactic cluster for dimensional integration. They're not planning to invade our reality, they're planning to merge it with theirs." The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. The Nephilim weren't just harvesting sentient life, they were harvesting entire dimensions, incorporating them into their expanding interdimensional empire. Every galaxy they conquered became part of a growing multidimensional construct designed to fuel their expansion across infinite realities. As if summoned by their growing understanding, the ancient Nephilim overmind materialized in the control chamber center. It wasn't a physical presence so much as a focused manifestation of consciousness so vast it seemed to fill not just the space around them, but the conceptual framework that defined space itself. When it spoke, the words arrived directly in their minds, bypassing language entirely. "Your resistance is noted and found irrelevant," the overmind communicated, its thoughts carrying the weight of eons. "Your species show promise as components in the Great Consumption. Your individual consciousnesses will be preserved as part of our collective understanding. This is an honor you cannot comprehend." The psychic pressure was overwhelming, pressing against their minds with the accumulated knowledge and malevolence of a consciousness that had consumed countless galaxies. The vegan telepaths in their team screamed as their mental shields began to crack under the assault. Reality around them became increasingly fluid as the overmind's will imposed itself on the fundamental nature of existence. But Morrison had spent his career learning to function under impossible pressure, and he recognized something crucial about their opponent. "It doesn't understand sacrifice," he realized, speaking aloud to cut through the psychic static. "Look at its responses, everything is about assimilation, absorption, adding to its collective. It can't comprehend the idea of choosing to lose something for a greater gain." The overmind deployed weapons that existed purely as concepts, fear given physical form, despair that could crush starships, hopelessness that erased the very possibility of victory. But human determination, reinforced by the desperate courage of their alien allies, proved surprisingly resistant to conceptual attacks. Their individual minds, working in coordination but maintaining independence, created a psychological defense that the hive mind consciousness couldn't counter. Dr. Cross, her hands moving across control interfaces that responded to intent rather than physical manipulation, began the gate shutdown sequence. The process required maintaining precise energy resonances while the overmind actively fought to prevent it, reality twisting around them as two incompatible approaches to existence struggled for dominance. "The shutdown requires someone to maintain the field resonance manually," Cross called out, her voice tight with the strain of interfacing with alien technology. "The control interface won't survive the energy feedback. Whoever stays behind won't make it out." Morrison stepped forward without hesitation, but found his path blocked by Kethvar, Karthek, and even Captain Valdez. "This is not a decision for one person," the Thackeray declared. "We succeed together or fail together." What happened next became legend throughout the galaxy. Instead of one person sacrificing themselves, the entire team linked their life support systems and distributed the energy feedback across multiple individuals. Zephyrian energy beings provided power, Thackeray warriors provided physical protection, vegan telepaths provided mental coordination, and humans provided the tactical innovation that made it all work together. The gate's energy field inverted, creating what Dr. Cross later termed an extinction pulse, a wave of disrupted dimensional energy that severed the connection between realities. Nephilim forces throughout the galaxy found themselves cut off from their interdimensional power source, their reality manipulation abilities suddenly limited to what they could generate locally. The overmind's death scream was heard across multiple dimensions as its consciousness, dependent on the gate's energy field for coherence, fragmented into billions of individual components. For the first time in cosmic ages, the collective consciousness that had dominated the Nephilim Empire ceased to exist, leaving its scattered forces confused, isolated, and vulnerable to conventional attacks. Chapter 6, New Galactic Order. In the immediate aftermath of the gate's destruction, the galaxy found itself fundamentally transformed. Scattered Nephilim forces, cut off from their interdimensional power source and freed from the overwhelming influence of the overmind, proved surprisingly manageable when faced with conventional military tactics. Many simply surrendered, their individual consciousnesses experiencing freedom of thought for the first time in eons. Others attempted to establish independent colonies, only to discover that their technology required constant maintenance they no longer knew how to provide. Morrison stood in the newly constructed Galactic Defense Headquarters, watching status reports flow in from across known space. The title of Supreme Galactic Defense Coordinator still felt strange, but the responsibility had settled on his shoulders with the weight of inevitability. Every major galactic power had formally requested human military advisors, recognizing that humanity's approach to warfare, unpredictable, innovative, and focused on practical results rather than elegant theory, had proven uniquely effective against impossible odds. Dr. Cross had established the Interdimensional Research Institute with backing from all surviving galactic powers, her hybrid technologies revolutionizing everything from space travel to planetary defense systems. The reality anchor technology she had developed during the crisis became the foundation for a new generation of defensive systems, while captured Nephilim devices provided insights into physics that would take centuries to fully understand. Her greatest achievement was the development of stable gate technology, portals that could connect distant regions of the galaxy without the reality-warping side effects of the original Hades Gate. The galactic political structure that emerged from the crisis bore little resemblance to the pre-invasion order. The Galactic Council was reformed with humanity holding not just equal membership, but a leadership role in military and strategic planning. Morrison found himself regularly mediating disputes between species that had once considered humans barely worthy of notice, his tactical innovations becoming standard doctrine for combined species operations. Captain Valdez had transformed from a simple mining contractor into the galaxy's primary logistics coordinator, his practical understanding of supply chain management proving invaluable for maintaining the new defensive alliances. His mining fleet had evolved into a mobile construction and supply operation, building defensive platforms and early warning systems throughout the galaxy's frontier regions. The industrial approaches that had proved so effective against Nephilim technology became the backbone of the new galactic military doctrine. The technological revolution triggered by the crisis reshaped every aspect of galactic civilization. Hybrid weapon systems that combined multiple species technologies became standard equipment for all military forces. Communication networks integrated vegan telepathic coordination with human redundancy protocols and Zephyrian quantum entanglement systems. Trade agreements were restructured around mutual defense obligations, creating an economic system based on shared survival rather than competitive advantage. More significantly, the galaxy's approach to exploration and expansion had fundamentally changed. Rather than individual species claiming territory and resources, joint expedition fleets were established to map potential threats and opportunities. Human tactical doctrine became the standard for these missions, emphasizing adaptability, redundancy, and the ability to function effectively when established protocols broke down. The cultural impact of the crisis was perhaps even more profound than the technological and political changes. Human values of cooperation, individual initiative within group coordination, and the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good began to spread throughout galactic civilization. Species that had operated according to rigid hierarchical structures for millennia found themselves adopting more flexible organizational approaches based on human military models. The Zephyrian Confederation, despite their vast technological superiority, began incorporating human-style contingency planning into their operations. The Thrakkeray Dominion restructured their entire military command system around human concepts of distributed leadership and independent tactical thinking. Even the surviving vegan colonies adopted human approaches to individual initiative and creative problem-solving. Morrison often reflected on the irony of their situation. Humanity had been considered the weakest link in galactic civilization, tolerated rather than respected, valued only for raw materials and industrial capacity. Now they found themselves at the center of a new galactic order, their approaches to warfare, cooperation, and survival forming the foundation for unprecedented interspecies unity. The rehabilitation of former Nephilim territories became a joint galactic effort, with human-led teams working to restore damaged space-time in regions where reality had been warped by interdimensional technology. These operations required the kind of innovative problem-solving that humans excelled at, further cementing their reputation as the galaxy's problem-solvers and crisis managers. As reports continued to flow in from the galaxy's far reaches, Morrison realized that they had accomplished something unprecedented in known history, not just survival against an existential threat, but the creation of a truly unified galactic civilization based on mutual respect and shared purpose. The battle at Hades Gate hadn't just saved the galaxy, it had transformed it into something stronger than it had ever been before. Chapter 7, Seeds of Domination. 5 years after the destruction of the Hades Gate, Commander Morrison stood before the Galactic Assembly, receiving reports from exploration missions that would have been impossible to imagine before the crisis. The galaxy that had once been divided into competing power blocks was now functioning as a unified civilization, with humanity at its organizational center not through conquest, but through earned respect and demonstrated competence. The transformation had been subtle but profound. When the Andromedan Collective sent their first diplomatic mission to the Milky Way, they requested specifically to negotiate with human representatives, having heard of humanity's unique approach to interspecies cooperation. When the Magellanic Clouds Federation needed military advisors to deal with a rogue AI uprising, they asked for human tactical specialists. When the Triangulum Galaxy's exploration services required logistics coordination for a massive deep space survey, they contracted with Captain Valdez's organization. Dr. Cross had become the galaxy's foremost expert on interdimensional phenomena, her research institute drawing the brightest minds from every known species. Her latest project involved using refined gate technology to establish permanent connections with other galaxies, but under careful human oversight to prevent the kind of catastrophic invasion they had barely survived. The reality anchor technology she had pioneered was now standard equipment on every exploration vessel, ensuring that no species would again face enemies that could manipulate the fundamental nature of existence. The gate network that emerged from Cross's research became the backbone of an expanding intergalactic civilization. Unlike the Nephilim's reality-warping portals, these human-designed gates created stable, safe passages that allowed for trade, communication, and mutual defense agreements across vast distances. Species that had never known of each other's existence found themselves part of a growing community centered on principles of cooperation and shared defense. Morrison found himself in the unprecedented position of commanding military forces drawn from dozens of species across multiple galaxies. His tactical innovations, originally developed out of desperation against the Nephilim threat, had become the standard doctrine for intergalactic defense operations. Former enemies had become willing students, eager to learn the human approach to warfare that emphasized adaptability, innovation, and the ability to turn apparent weaknesses into strategic advantages. The economic transformation was equally significant. Human industrial approaches, once considered crude and inefficient by galactic standards, proved ideally suited for the challenges of intergalactic commerce and construction. Valdez's logistics networks had evolved into the primary infrastructure for trade between galaxies, his practical approach to supply chain management becoming the model for economic cooperation on a cosmic scale. More importantly, the organizational structures that humans had brought to galactic civilization were spreading throughout the known universe. Species that had maintained rigid hierarchical systems for millions of years found themselves adopting human concepts of distributed leadership, individual initiative, and collaborative decision-making. The flexibility that had allowed humanity to survive against the Nephilim became the foundation for a new form of cosmic civilization. The expansion was remarkably peaceful, driven not by military conquest but by the simple recognition that human-led organizations were more effective, more adaptive, and more successful than traditional galactic power structures. Species voluntarily requested integration into human-centered alliances, seeking access to the tactical innovations, technological advances, and organizational efficiencies that had emerged from the Nephilim crisis. Even former galactic powers that had once dominated entire star systems found themselves following human leadership. The Zephyrian Confederation, despite their advanced technology, recognized that human strategic thinking had proven superior to their elegant but inflexible approaches. The Thrakkeray Dominion, proud warriors with millennia of military tradition, acknowledged that human tactical doctrine was more effective than their honor-bound combat codes. As Morrison reviewed the latest expansion reports, he realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in cosmic history, domination not through force or coercion, but through demonstrated competence and the voluntary recognition of superiority. Other species didn't fear human leadership, they actively sought it out, understanding that human-led organizations were simply more successful at achieving their goals. The battle at Hades' Gate had revealed humanity's true evolutionary advantage, not advanced technology or superior physical capabilities, but an unique combination of tactical flexibility, innovative thinking, and the ability to inspire cooperation among diverse groups. These qualities, forged by humanity's relatively recent emergence into galactic civilization, proved ideally suited for the challenges of cosmic leadership. Looking toward the future, Morrison could see the outlines of an emerging intergalactic empire unlike anything in known history. It would be an empire built not on conquest and subjugation, but on mutual benefit and voluntary association. Species would join not because they were forced to, but because they recognized that human leadership offered them opportunities for growth, security, and advancement that they could not achieve on their own. The Gate network continued to expand, connecting new galaxies and species to the growing cosmic civilization. Each new connection brought fresh perspectives, technologies, and capabilities, but all were integrated under the organizational principles that humans had developed. The diversity that had once led to galactic conflict became a source of strength under human coordination. As he prepared for the next phase of expansion, Morrison reflected on the strange journey that had brought humanity from the galaxy's weakest member to its natural leader. The ancient Nephilim had sought to impose their vision of unity through the Great Consumption, absorbing all other consciousness into their collective. Humanity offered something better, a form of cooperation that preserved individual identity while creating collective strength. It was, Morrison realized, the difference between conquest and leadership, between domination and true galactic unity. End of story.